I'm Katrina. I still remember that Easter dinner, the moment when my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not invited. You can stay home and watch your son." It was like a punch to the gut, especially since I was still holding the check I'd written for her mortgage that month. She expected me to break down, to plead for a place at the table. Instead, I surprised her and everyone else. I smiled, and then I pulled out a manila folder from my bag. The silence that followed was deafening. Let me take you back a few months. I'm a single mom, and for the past 2.5 years, I've been the one keeping my family afloat. My parents, Arthur and Vivian, live in a beautiful colonial house on Elmwood Drive. It's the house I grew up in, with a wraparound porch and a large garden. 2.5 years ago, Arthur had a serious back injury from his work as a carpenter. He had to go on short-term disability, and Vivian called me late one night in tears. "Katrina, we're going to lose the house. Your father can't work, and I don't know what to do," she sobbed. I felt my heart break for them. I told her I'd cover the mortgage for a few months until Arthur got back on his feet. Those few months turned into 30 months. Every month on the first, I'd sit at my small kitchen table, open my laptop, and transfer $2,400 from my checking account to the mortgage servicer. I also took care of their property tax installments, scheduled Arthur's physical therapy, and renewed their car insurance when Vivian forgot. Meanwhile, my older sister, Isabella, lived in a fancy penthouse in the city. She carried a designer handbag that cost more than my monthly rent and spent her days at the spa or attending high-end events. She never contributed a single cent to the family, but Vivian always talked about Isabella as if she was the golden child. One Tuesday in early February, Vivian called me with wonderful news. Isabella was engaged to Ethan, a wealthy businessman from a prominent family. They wanted a June wedding in Rome. "Katrina, you're so good with numbers. We need someone to handle the venue." "I wouldn't even know where to start on those Italian websites," she said sweetly. I was happy for Isabella, so I spent 3 evenings researching venues in Rome. I found a beautiful villa with a view of the Colosseum. It cost $20,000 for a weekend reservation, and I had to put down a 50% deposit. Since Isabella didn't want the charge on her statement while Ethan was consolidating their accounts, and Vivian didn't have that kind of credit limit, I used my own credit card. The next day, Isabella emailed me a long list of requirements for the wedding, including linen colors, florist preferences, and dietary restrictions for Ethan's family. Not a single word of thanks. When I scrolled to the bottom of the email and saw the preliminary guest list, my name wasn't on it. I thought she'd just forgotten. Looking back, I should have seen the signs earlier. When I graduated from college with honors, my parents were 30 minutes late because Isabella had a modeling audition. Vivian didn't even apologize. She spent the whole reception on the phone giving Isabella feedback. When my son, Max, was born, Vivian showed up at the hospital 2 days later, saying she was helping Isabella move. She held Max for a few minutes, took a photo, and left to meet Isabella for dinner. Max asked me about Rome one night. "Mommy, are we going to Rome too?" he asked with those big, innocent eyes. I hated saying, "We'll see, baby," but I didn't even know if I was invited. After Max fell asleep, I opened my laptop and added up all the money I'd spent on my family. The mortgage payments over 30 months totaled $72,000. The venue deposit was $20,000, and I'd covered at least $10,000 in miscellaneous expenses. That was a total of $102,000. I screenshot every transaction and put them in a folder on my desktop, which I named Family Finances. 3 weeks later, I called Isabella to ask about the guest list. "Mom said she'd talk to you about that," she said after a long silence. I called Vivian, and she explained in a matter-of-fact tone, "It's a small ceremony, Katrina. Ethan's family is very particular. A single mother with a 5-year-old isn't the image we want to present. Besides, someone needs to watch Max." I was devastated, but I didn't argue. I just ended the call. Then, I found out from my Aunt Lucy that Vivian had created a group chat for the Rome wedding. I wasn't in it. Vivian had even told everyone in the chat that I preferred to stay home with Max and wasn't a travel person. 3 weeks before Easter, Vivian called again and asked me to handle the food for the Easter dinner. You know how Isabella and I are. We can't cook for 30 people, she said. I agreed, but I'd already started to form a plan. I went to an office supply store and bought a manila folder. I printed every bank statement, auto, transfer confirmation, the venue contract, and the email chain with the venue coordinator. I stacked them neatly, clipped them, and put them in the folder. On Easter morning, I dressed Max in a little suit, and I put on a nice dress. We drove to my parent house. The lawn was perfectly manicured, and there were cars lined up in the driveway. Isabella's shiny Mercedes was parked right in front. Inside, the house was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Vivian was the center of attention, as always. When she stood up and announced that the whole family was flying to Rome for Isabella's wedding, the table erupted in cheers. I waited for the noise to die down and then asked, "What date is the ceremony?" Vivian turned to me and said, "Oh, sweetie, you're not invited. You can stay home and watch Max." The table went completely silent. I took a deep breath, smiled, and opened the manila folder. For the past 2.5 years, I've paid the mortgage on this house. That's $72,000, I said, showing the bank statements. I also booked and paid for Isabella's wedding venue, $20,000, I continued, presenting the contract. And here's an email where Mom told Ethan's family that I prefer a quiet life and won't mind being left out, 3 weeks before she asked me to put down the deposit. Vivian's face turned pale. Isabella started to yell, "You can't cancel my venue. That's my wedding." I kept my voice calm. The contract is in my name, and the credit card is mine. Legally, I can cancel it. Arthur shifted in his chair and said, "Katrina, this isn't the time or the place." I looked at him directly. "When was the time, Dad? When you saw me struggling to pay for all this and said nothing?" The room was filled with whispers. Some of my relatives looked shocked, while others seemed to be finally seeing the truth. Vivian tried to defend herself, but I had all the evidence. I closed the folder and said, "I'm not angry. I'm done. The mortgage payment stops today, and I'll be canceling the venue reservation on Monday." I picked up Max's jacket, took his hand, and walked out of the house. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. Max asked me, "Mommy, why is Grandma mad?" I told him, "Grandma and I had a disagreement, baby. It's not your fault." The next 48 hours were tough. Vivian left a long voicemail, crying and threatening me. Isabella sent me a series of angry texts. My other relatives called, telling me to apologize and keep the peace. But then, I opened my laptop and looked at the family finances folder. I realized that I'd given them $102,000 in 2.5 years, while I was living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. I decided that I couldn't go back. My boss, Ms. Thompson, called me into her office. She told me that the company was opening a branch in Miami and recommended me for the lead bookkeeper position. Miami was far enough from my family, and it had a lower cost of living. I decided to take the offer. I also got a call from my uncle, Henry. He'd had a similar experience with Vivian years ago. He told me to stand my ground and offered to help me find an apartment in Miami. I called the venue coordinator in Rome and canceled the reservation. It only took a few minutes. I sent an email to Vivian and Isabella, informing them of the cancellation and wishing Isabella a wonderful wedding. I wrote a letter to my parents, telling them that I would no longer be making mortgage payments. I sent it certified mail. Then I started packing. My friend Lily came over to help. We filled boxes with my things and Max's toys. Max didn't really understand what was happening, but he could tell that I was happier. We drove to Miami. As we left, I didn't look back. In Miami, I started a new life. Max loved his new school, and I loved my new job. Isabella's wedding was a downgraded affair. They had to find a smaller venue in Rome. Vivian and Arthur had to refinance their house because they couldn't afford the mortgage without my help. My father sent me a letter. He said he was sorry for not standing up for me. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. Vivian sent me a letter with an invoice for the difference in the wedding venue cost, asking me to pay. I just laughed. Now, I'm learning to measure my worth by how I feel when I wake up. I'm not defined by what I give to my family. I'm Katrina. a strong single mom, and I'm building a life that's truly mine. If you're in a similar situation, know that you're allowed to stop, to leave, and to be okay afterward. It's not selfish, it's survival.